Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this September meeting of the MTA Safety Committee. Do we have any public speakers, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir. We have one public speaker, Mr. Murray Bowden.
Morning. Morning, Susan. I watched the meeting, the one I missed on Monday, and you said that you were lost in the Oculus trying to figure out how to get here. What I want to talk about relates to that, essentially, because the people who make those signs, traffic engineers, don't understand what you needed. And in Mount Kisco, where Metro North did this big red box there and said, this is safe, they didn't know what they were doing. And in fact, it's illegal. A box that is for two intersections of two roads is a square painted white, or a rectangular white, with crosshatches. You have them all over New York City. They're called "Don't Block the Box." 2 points. The fact that Metro North put that there, and I think you were there, Tom, at that presentation, but they didn't know what they did, and it's not safe. Colorblind people cannot see red. That's why at toll booths there's a red X and a green arrow, because they can't tell the color. And if you want people to stay out of that box, then you put up a camera and a 2-point violation, and that's called safety. Well, what that tells you is that the ability of the president of Metro North to know what's safe and not is wanting and has to be replaced. You're getting $5 million for safety improvements of railroad crossings. And there was a discussion on Monday about cameras. The proper cameras are cameras that record somebody in the box that can be enforced. I got a ticket on 10th Street some years ago for passing a red light. I didn't happen to see it, but I got the ticket and I paid it. It's enforceable. And if the law has to be corrected and updated, New York City DOT knows how to do it. I've met with them.
If you could begin to wrap up, please, Mr. Bowden.
The problem is safety. That's one example. I have a number of other ones. Safety requires consistency and following the law. You just asked me to follow the rule. I will do that. I ask you to follow the rule and follow that manual on uniform traffic and control devices and give drivers honest information and not somebody's, well, I think this is okay because the red color looks good.
Concludes our public speaking. You have the minutes for last Safety Committee meeting. I have a motion regarding them. Second, any comments or questions regarding those minutes? Yes, Mr. Zuckerman?
I appreciate that my name was added to the attendee list. However, I must have not said very much because I was in Cape Cod during that meeting on my sabbatical.
So noted.
So please remove my name.
So noted. Any other comments? All in favor of approving the minutes? Aye. Opposed? Work plan, Mr. Mayor?
There are no changes to the work plan.
Thank you very much.
With your permission, though, I'd like to say a few words about our work with the National Safety Council. It was already up there. Can move on to the next slide. So we've talked about in the Safety Committee the National Safety Council a number of times. We have partnered up with the National Safety Council to conduct a metrics workshop about a year ago. We've subscribed all of our employees to their Family Safety and Health magazine, and we've done a number of other initiatives with them and continue to work closely with them. I just wanted to mention a little bit about who the National Safety Council is. They were founded by Robert Campbell in 1913 and have more than 50,000 member companies, and the MTA has a corporate membership in the National Safety Council. They started life as a nonprofit interested in reducing the problem of industrial accidents, workplace accidents, and they've expanded. Their current mission is preventing injuries, deaths at work, in homes, and communities, and on the road. And I mention all of this, you can go to the next slide, because a subsidiary organization of the National Safety Council is the Campbell Institute. It's a fairly recent, it's named for the founder of the National Safety Council. It was founded only a few years ago by 18 charter member companies to really be an environmental health and safety center of excellence. Membership is only open to those organizations that apply and qualify and are vetted. And yesterday we got the good news that our application, the MTA's application to become a member of the Campbell Institute has been approved. So the Institute was founded on the premise that regardless of a company's mission, we are all on a similar journey toward safety excellence, and they bring organizations together to identify and share best safety practices. As such a large transportation authority, the MTA really, much as it's easy to reach out to our peer transportation groups, with respect to safety, we have peers in other industries, the chemical process industry and the nuclear industry, and this membership will enable us to better share best safety practices, not only receiving information from the Campbell Institute, but also contributing to the Institute and sharing with them what has worked for us. This last slide just shows some of the criteria that the Campbell Institute uses to select those for membership, and certainly leadership and commitment to world-class safety, integration of employee safety and health into business management, and you can read the other bullets that are there, but you notice thoughtful use of leading indicators in addition to a traditional use of safety metrics, which is something that we've talked about a great deal in this committee, and a robust continuous improvement process, which is something that the MTA has, and working with the safety leads, we're only working to strengthen. So I just wanted to mention that because I'm pleased that we've been accepted for membership.
I think David's done an excellent job of continuing the tradition that the agencies themselves had in terms of reaching out to others who have core competencies, specialization, and safety. If you remain fixed in your own position, you don't necessarily get to identify world-class practices and what you can do to improve things. So this is a continuation of the effort, and I applaud it. Safety metrics report.
So on Monday, each of the safety leads presented safety reports to their respective operating committees, and as has become our tradition, we've repeated those metrics in your committee book for your reference, but we didn't plan to go through them in any detail unless there are any questions that anyone has.
Ira?
It isn't. I raised a question at the Long Island Railroad Committee meeting regarding the New York and Atlantic Railroad operation, because it's over our railroad. There was the FRA came out with a report regarding an accident, and it was an accident not on our main line. But if you read it, and I recommend everybody read it, it's extremely disturbing. They couldn't locate the engineer. I mean, the facts speak for themselves. They couldn't locate the engineer, so they couldn't interview them. The conductor said, I mean, these are just the two that I find most troubling. The conductor said that they were confused regarding the safety rules of the New York and Atlantic. This was just over a year ago. I'd like to know, not necessarily today, but I think it should be reported to this board, the New York and Atlantic, what have they done to change things? I mean, it was, to me, it's another accident waiting to happen. So, I mean, it questioned whether their crews are even qualified. So I was disturbed in reading it, and I just wonder if anybody else here had read it and what we're doing to ensure that the New York Atlantic, running over our railroad, is running a safe operation. All their engineers are properly qualified and understand the importance of safety.
I'll start and see if Pat wants to add anything. 20-some years ago, Ira, you and I are sitting in different places. You weren't a member of the board. I was in Pat's position as the president of Long Island Railroad, and that's when the decision was made that we were going to, for a variety of different reasons, privatize the freight operations of Long Island Railroad. That was the initiating event that actually brought the New York and Atlantic here. To say that there was a little bit of trepidation on the part of the railroad, when you contract out a service of operation and making sure that the safe operation of that railroad on your own tracks is one that, we'd never done before. So we wanted to make sure we had the appropriate controls in place, which we think the contract did provide for. We've now had the benefit of years' experience, and they have succeeded in many places, and that was a failure. There's no doubt about it, that was a failure. And so as we continue the relationship with the New York and Atlantic, it's important for us to make sure that we are enforcing that and that we're staying in touch with them in terms of what their requirements need to be. And in actual fact, they have to follow the rules as prescribed by the Long Island Railroad. Do you want to add to that, Pat, at all? So it's not taken lightly. We appreciate your comment.
Yeah, just a couple things. We received that report yesterday, so we are in the process of evaluating the report. I am meeting with their leadership on Friday, and we'll discuss their activities in light of that report. You have to appreciate New York and Atlantic is a part of what's called Anacostia Rail Holdings. It is a short line operator that operates 6 short line railroads throughout the country. So while the operation here is of limited size, they certainly have the knowledge and the resources to be able to deal with FRA issues and regulations. So, you know, there are a lot of resources. I want to make sure they're all being brought into bear to focus on this situation. And, you know, after we meet on Friday, I'll be able to tell you more.
Neil?
Thank you, sir. One of the privileges, David, you have, particularly when you, in your role, particularly when we look at multiple safety reports that are different and rightfully so customized for the different divisions, I would be interested to know whether in this session and going forward, when you look across the various safety reports and the conversations you have, what are you learning as commonalities or the lessons that are not but one function, Metro-North, Long Island Railroad, but across them, that we can actually glean some sort of insight that says, you know what, when you step back and you look at all of these reports, you can start seeing X happening more of, or Y is getting better. Because when we sit in Metro-North, I can't tell what's happening in the bus group, and if we're doing it in each one's conversation, this is the only place and we meet infrequently, or relatively infrequently, to have that kind of insight. So I'd love to know if you have any reactions to each of these various reports as you put them together.
It's a good question, and I don't know that I have a good just off-the-cuff reaction to it. I might, with your permission, kind of take that as a homework assignment to come back and speak to you about. I mean, at a big picture, I mean, all of our transportation activities rely on human endeavor. So you know, human error, human decision-making, human fatigue, human adherence to standard operating procedures cuts across all modes of transportation outside the MTA and, not surprisingly, inside the MTA as well. So I do very much see it as my job to help the agencies share best practices with each other, and we've been very active in doing so. And so, with your permission, I'll come back and talk a little more about that.
I'll add to that. I think in prior discussions, in terms of what we thought what we have committed to as a board and as the agency heads, is to focus the safety committee forward-looking indicators, keeping at the operating committee more backward-looking, and by having a balance between the two. I can tell you there's one that is emerging that I know will cut across all agencies. David hit on it. A large part of our operations are still very dependent on the actions of a person doing their job. We can layer it with signal systems, we can layer it with alarm systems, we can do a number of things, but a lot of it has to do with that. And the awareness and the increased awareness of the effect of fatigue on people as they operate. And the other issue, there are many people who are under medication prescribed by doctors that they need. And what effect do those medications have on them? In a way that, you know, we're not trying to blame the employee, but the awareness of what do we need to do to make sure that we're dealing with fatigue as UN operations occur, and the effect of medications as they need to be. And those are areas I can tell you that we're going to ask the safety committee across all the agencies and David to take a look at. And there's awareness at the federal government on those as well. Any further comment? Andrew?
When on the Transit Committee report, under fires, I thought we were going to enumerate the type of fire, electrical, debris, in tunnel, in station. I'm not seeing that. Wasn't that something we said we were going to do?
Sure.
I believe we were moving to this particular grid without that information, but at a couple times a year, we were going to give that information. I believe we did at the last Safety Committee, which usually I will also read out that a majority of our incidents still are debris along the right-of-way. But I do understand the page that you're thinking of was in the older report that had more details.
Yeah.
Dave.
But there was a commitment made, and I think you said it, Cheryl, that we're not going to stop gathering that
Right,
information.
I still gather that information.
For example, if the number of fires were to increase and the trend were to get outside the pattern that was established, and then you drill down to a category of fire, they have that data available.
Yeah, definitely still keeping all of it.
Mr. Merdler?
Tom, a quick question, and I hope I'm not out of order, and I apologize for being late. We have apparently a somewhat greater incident, greater number of incidents of bus collisions than we have had in relatively recent years. Is there, and as I understood it from somebody, from Ms. Kennedy or somebody else, many of them were rear-end collisions. My question is, to what extent have we examined whether the change in the road patterns in the city of New York, constricting the traffic, double parking or triple parking by UPS, FedEx, and the trucks, have had an adverse impact on that? It seems to me that to the extent that has not been studied, it ought to be, because if it is confirmed that that has an impact, then I think the city of New York has got to do something to stop.
Steve?
So I know we had this conversation back in July, and anecdotally, I would agree with your assessment of what may be contributed to the rise in rear end and back of the bus kind of accidents. We are, or when I say we, my staff and Department of Buses is actively involved in the city's Vision Zero task force, and we are raising that issue on a regular basis. That we meet every 2 weeks, so that's something that's on the forefront. We haven't really had an opportunity to be able to say definitively that something, what is actually causing this. We can say that we're seeing a restriction in real estate for us to operate on. So there's a lot less real estate for people to navigate through the streets, and there's a lot more vehicles on the road. So intuitively, where you're going, I think is probably right. But we need to be more vigilant. To the extent that there aren't bus lanes, we should be trying to get more and more bus lanes. But it's a work in progress for sure, and over time, I think we'll erode into it. But it's a big problem.
Steve, if I may add, Tom, we have the added problem both with articulated buses and non-articulated, that in places like Amsterdam Avenue, we're really basically down to a single lane of traffic. When the buses pull out from the bus stop and have to move past the UPS or the FedEx truck, they are into the other side. What you have is a 6-lane road, 1 lane of it devoted now to bicycles, sometimes occupied, sometimes not, then another lane for parking, then another lane for illegal parking, then another lane for driving, then another lane for illegal parking. I mean, it goes on and on.
And you're not overstating it either.
No, he's not.
No, I'm never known for overstatement, but my point is simply, it's obviously noticeable. And it seems to me we ought to document it. It seems to me that what we have is an added risk to the bus driver, to the pedestrian, and to the passengers of the bus. We ought to be able to identify it, and the city ought to be asked to get smart and change it.
So we are, the NYPD does have a member sitting on the task force. It's Chief Chan's office. Often he's there. When he's not, he sends some of his seconds to it. So we've raised this issue with them. We've had some pretty aggressive interaction with the borough commanders in the police precinct. So we're dealing with it from an NYP standard as well. But I think, from my perspective, I want to make sure that I'm not using this as an excuse, as a reason why we're having accidents because we get hit in the rear and it's everybody else's fault. My challenge is to make sure that I give my operators the tools to try to deal with what's in front being presented to them, and not put themselves in a position where the back of their bus is exposed when it doesn't have to be exposed. And so we see that a lot. So it's really, trying to change the conditions out on the streets absolutely will help us tremendously. But I think don't want to have this as a crutch, as a reason why we can't fix some of these problems, because I know that we really can if we pay a lot of attention and stay focused on it.
Let me add one last question. The world seems to know my view about cameras, but my question is, to what extent, if any, would it be useful to have given the number of rear-end collisions that Ms. Kennedy has correctly pointed out, would it be useful to have a camera on some of these buses so we could track exactly what's going on?
So we have a lot of cameras on our buses. We don't have any out the back of the bus. You have to look at to see the value of that. But just as an example, in July, there were 330 collisions in the rear of the bus, which is about 60% of our overall collisions. So it's a big number and something we need to really try to deal with and grapple.
Thank you. Thank you.
Andrew?
Just to confirm Mr. Merdler's observation, I'm on Amsterdam Avenue quite a bit, and it has become gridlock since the installation of the bike lane and the commercial vehicle loading zones. You didn't have to be a genius to know that if a truck was delivering to the west side of the avenue and you gave it a loading zone on the east side of the avenue, it would double park on the west side of the avenue rather than walk the goods across the street. So you are down to one or two moving lanes, and in addition to what Mr. Merdler mentioned, I would be very interested in the throughput and adherence to schedules of the M7 and M11 buses. I am sure you will see a big degradation in their meeting their timetables.
Jamie?
A question, and then depending on the answer, a suggestion. You both mentioned, and obviously accurately so, that a significant portion of the safety issues that we face are really human-related and human error. Taking the issue of drowsiness and operator inattention, on the new trains for LLIRR and other ones that we anticipate ordering, is that an element of the order? Is any type of anti-attention or attention or drowsiness or sleep technology?
Yeah, I mean, that's common in locomotives to have alerters and other technology, and certainly down the road, positive train control will provide some redundancy, but really at the root of arriving to work fit for duty and able to perform is really getting good sleep. And so we are building out our sleep disorders or sleep apnea screening program from Metro North to the rest of the MTA agencies with hopes of preventing inattention rather than catching it at the last moment.
For decades, there's been a control on locomotives and transit equipment called the dead man feature.
Right.
So if the person had a heart attack and died, the train would come to a stop. You need to look no further than the most recent Amtrak derailment outside of Philadelphia. Excellent train engineer, excellent record, seemed to do everything correctly. He was doing everything correctly in terms of accelerating, braking in a series of curves, and then something happened and he didn't. So in that particular case, fatigue may have played a different role in terms of his ability to process information or be awake but asleep at the same time. So that's the area that a lot of people are concerned about, especially as it relates to what effect, possibly what effect medications may have on
Right, and I only think about the cars in particular that we've moved beyond the equivalent of the dead man feature in the cars to attention technology now, where the car, through the technology, is really aware of whether you're heads up paying attention to the thing in front of you as opposed to just you've taken a foot off a pedal, right? It's gotten much more advanced, and I wonder if some of those advancements
on the
are
train side,
applicable.
we've got communication-based train control that does it for transit, and PTC, positive train control for railroads. On the bus side, the technology is lagging a little bit behind, but additional warning mechanisms to make sure that outside the range of vision, things will be brought to the attention of the bus operator. So we are using technologies. Ira?
On rear-end collisions, since we have two commissioners who believe that Amsterdam Avenue is a problem, I know First Avenue is also a nightmare regarding the bus lanes taken up with traffic. That's a traffic issue. That's a throughput issue, whatever, it's service issue. But it would be good to see these rear-end collisions where they're occurring. I mean, if a lot of them are occurring in Manhattan and congested areas, that would lead us to believe that might, or even over time, if that's possible, it'd be good to see a report regarding that.
So we do track location of these accidents, and we actually deploy our resources out to where the high accident locations are to try to see what we can mitigate, but we can certainly share that with you, in future meetings, because there are hot spots along the routes that are more problematic than others, and we know where they are. To be honest with you, it moves from month to month. We do an analysis every month of the previous month's collisions, and we do see that. But it does move. It's not, generally speaking, the same location. I attribute a lot of that to where we deploy our resources and how we're out there monitoring the service levels and the compliance of the operators. So when we're there, the problem moves to somewhere else. But we do track that, and I can share that with you.
That'd be great.
Safety promotion?
Very good. So we've talked about SMS in this committee a number of times. SMS stands for Safety Management Systems. It's really just the management of safety as a business process. One of the 4 pillars of SMS is safety promotion. We've organized the work plan of this committee around the 4 pillars of SMS, and so we'll be talking about safety promotion and also safety risk management in this meeting. Safety promotion is where we show our employees that we actually care about safety, we care about them, and we find an opportunity to either remind them or teach them how to stay safe on the job. And each of the agencies does this in a variety of ways. And so what we thought we would do today is just sort of take you through some of the safety promotion, safety focus activities at each of the agencies. And so Bridges and Tunnels is up first with Pashko.
Good morning. Yes, thank you, David. We at Bridges and Tunnels also view safety promotion as a very crucial component of our safety management system, so we'll talk to you briefly about it. But first, let me just give a little bit of a background and a little bit of a context. As initiated by our chairman and agency president, we at Bridges and Tunnels had our first safety stand-down back in December of 2013. And with one primary goal to refocus on safety and make safety a high priority top-down from highest level to the lowest level of our workforce, not only for our employees but also for our customers and for our contractors. So to that end, we've continued to promote safety focus efforts that have included quarterly labor management safety meetings, which are held at each facility on quarterly basis, with emphasis on cooperation between labor and management. This is in order to identify and mitigate any safety issues, as well as discuss any ongoing safety issues and safety goals. We also have toolbox discussions, which is geared mostly towards our maintenance workforce, maintenance employees. In addition to our mandatory training, this discussion is given mostly for a new process or new employees or high-risk activities or after a near miss. Again, this is to just clarify processes and highlight some of the risks that are involved with each process. We continue to do roll calls, which is for our uniform workforce, and before each shift is dispatched, our supervision takes about 5 to 10 minutes of time to discuss safety awareness, talk about various issues such as security alerts even, and safety issues on a plaza. As you can imagine, working in a live traffic could be very challenging, so we try to remind our officers to continuously be aware of the situation, aware of the conditions, so they go home safe at the end of the day. We also have something that has been very well received, a task force called Safety Task Force, which is a unit comprised of labor participants, safety and health department managers, and also our senior staff. And this is a comprehensive unit that performs audits on an annual basis. It's usually a day-long activity, sometimes even longer than that. And this is the time where they look at data, look at trends, see where what happened during a period of time, and try to make improvements as we go forward. So in reality, I could say that this has been a joint and successful effort by our safety and health, by operations and engineering and constructions to continue to promote safety at our entire agency, at all of our facilities. So in the next slide, I will talk briefly about some of the topics that we discussed during these aforementioned activities. One of them is a review of our performance, which is simply a simple question: how well are we doing? And this is to try to see a bigger picture, but also to take a deeper dive into issues that we face as an agency. So a review of performance is kind of a important tool to us to see how well what we need to change, if we need to change anything. We also look at accidents and incidents. We perform investigations, and this is clearly not to find facts and not blame, and to find root causes. It's a simple principle of asking a question of what happened and follow that with a series of whys, and that hopefully would lead us to a root cause of what happened so we can learn and we don't repeat those again. We also monitor trends and develop strategies to prevent slips, trips, falls, struck bys, which are the most common types of injuries, not only for our workforce, but also for our contractors. We look at trends, we see where we can make things a little better, improvement. We look at also, we review customer collisions and customer collisions with injuries. The idea here is to identify types and factors involved in these accidents. Identify accident-prone areas so we can mitigate them where possible. Again, looking at these factors and types gives us a little better picture of what is going on our facilities. As you know, we have 9 facilities, and we monitor these trends to make sure that what we can we do it in time to try to prevent some of these accidents. We also look at capital projects and conduct a risk assessment for them, during which time we discuss impact of the major capital construction activities on all our facilities, either short or long-term impacts. And this is a time to incorporate safety as part of any capital construction that we're doing. As you know, we are in the process of doing a lot of capital construction projects in the last couple of years. So it's an opportunity for us to work together to try to engineer the safety as a part of a ongoing process. We also review and update policies as processes change. We make sure that policies are updated and reviewed to meet those needs. And lastly, we also deal with safety reminders, sometimes seasonal reminders that are bulletins and advisories posted on our intranet or on bulletin boards. And these safety reminders cover various topics such as seasonal flu awareness and activity, but also we talk about more exotic issues such as Zika recently, Legionella last summer, or Ebola the year before. So all of these topics, we believe, will continue to make our focus clear on safety as we strive to provide a safer and healthier environment, not only for our workforce, but also for our customers and for our contractors. Thank you. Unless there are any questions, obviously, feel free to ask.
So Peter Corner and Capital Construction up next.
Good morning. MTACC relies on safety through its contractors. We employ roughly 3,000 contractors over our 3 or 4 main programs. And our safety has been defined in 2014 by the leading indicator strategy. The leading indicator strategy is essentially born of lagging indicators that identify hazard and mitigate through strategies that we share with our contractors on a monthly basis. We develop and we audit what we put forth to do. And I'm happy to report that since 2014, we have continuously reduced our BLS rates by 30% and 40% respectively. And we are following the same trend for 2016 to date. How do we get there? I already mentioned the monthly safety strategy meetings, where we essentially identify trends from reports from the field from our team of safety inspectors. We meet with the contractors, with the construction management, and we address their management strategies, span of control, engineering controls, and the like to assure that our workers are safe. We do an audit, joint hazard assessment team, where we essentially assess and review safe work plans, construction work plans, and quality work plans alike to assure that safety is promoted on site. We also are sharing a concern of safety through our first responders, fire department, through familiarization tours, evacuation drills, and the like, to assure that once again, in case of a catastrophic event, there are no mishaps, to get our workers out safely and offer them a first medical care. We do on a weekly and daily basis hazard analysis along with injury trends analysis, to once again define what are the best strategies to deploy new PPE controls, engineer controls, and the likes to give our workers a chance to go home safely every day. Daily toolbox talks and take fives cover operations that are in front of them, remind them of what needs to be done, how to plan it, make sure that their processes are well attended in terms of equipment, materials, and PPE. We culminate this in a annual safety report that we can share with everybody here that basically addresses our results, it addresses our goals, and it talks about objectives that we would like to meet in the future. Thank you.
Mitch?
Obviously, MTACC has a little different scenario because in almost all cases, the employee is not your employee, as opposed to Transit or TBTA or Long Island Metro North, where the employee is the agency's employee. So, assuming for sake of argument, something had to happen, what procedures would MTACC use beyond the analysis or the safety meeting in, I was going to use the word, encouraging the contractor to be safe, but I'd use a much more descriptive adjective than that if it got to that point where you end up having an issue with the safety protocols or safety results of an individual contractor. What would MTACC do in that context?
Well, first and foremost, we make sure that the contractors indeed adhere to the compliance that he has put forth. In the event that he hasn't, we will review the incident. We will call onto the contractor. We will issue a stand down or a stop work order, and we will essentially call for disciplinary action if indeed that's the case. This is not, this is not unique. I mean, we are very strong in terms of assuring that lessons learned indeed incorporated for the future APP or accident prevention programs. And we are not bashful in promoting a strong discipline, resulting in loss of a job or potentially loss of a contractor's efforts with MTA. All of that is also reflected in our ACE evaluation that we do 3 times a year.
I would assume then that if another contract was being awarded and a contractor who in the previous contract had not met your safety expectations, for lack of a better term, that new contractor would be penalized in the analysis of whether that was a responsible contractor.
And that is the ACE evaluation, exactly. Okay. I mean, the contractor has an opportunity to better himself over 2 periods, right? However, if that doesn't change, then obviously that contractor could be precluded from being able to work with us again.
I'd like to say something. Consistent with back when I was Assistant Vice President of System Safety at Transit, resident in the agency is the authority and the chief safety officers to shut down any job, whether it's internal job or external job. We will sort out the legal issues with respect to whether or not someone has a claim if we shut a job down, but it's unmistakably clear they have that authority, and that extends to Peter as well within MTACC. Because ultimately, from a standpoint of what's the right thing to do from a human standpoint, irrespective of what the legal accountability is, we have that, the moral accountability.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Most of my question has been answered, but I would simply ask this. Can you give us an example of a contractor? You don't have to name a name, but what was the nature of the sanction? Can you think of one?
We had a serious incident back in 2015, late 2014, I'm sorry, where a drill penetrated an envelope of a tunnel. I think everybody remembers it. And there was a lot of finger pointings. At the end of the day, the subcontractor to the prime has been essentially removed from the job immediately. That prime paid all the damages that were incurred, and there was a serious management shakeup within that particular contract. So again, we take it very seriously. We investigate not only accidents, we also investigate near misses, especially when it comes to utilities, when it comes to things where it affects the public as well. And we are not bashful in removing contractors from the site, if indeed that's what's required.
Mr. Merdler?
Let me provide a moment of balance. When you remove a contractor from a job, as often as not, the job is delayed. And not only is that contractor's work delayed, but the work behind him is similarly delayed. To what extent, rather than going to that kind of an approach, have you given thought to having economic penalties directed at the contractor himself rather than providing for delays that are just not in public interest, I don't think?
We have gone as far as withheld payments until such time that we have seen that a proper mitigation have been in place. When we say we remove a contractor, that is truly an exceptional case, right? We are more often looking at it more from a financial punitive damages in terms of, you hold on to contractor's payment for a period of time, you hit them in a pocket. And that's where cash flow comes into place. And we seek a immediate adjustments to their work plans, construction work plans, and disciplinary action within the contract itself. You're right, we do not want it to lose productivity, but at the same time, we need to promote safety.
I have to step in here. I have to step in because while I understand that concern on balance, there are times you have to send a message to the contractor that pain will come because the safety issue is paramount. And nothing gets anyone's attention than shutting down a job. And it has to be in the authority of the chief safety officers to know that. Because if you let that creep into the organization, you can also say we don't want to delay trains, and yet we've got a safety issue on the right-of-way with our own employees. So I understand the concern about balance, but ultimately the decision has to be weighed from the standpoint of what's in the best safety interest of the employees and the assets involved.
Mr. Chairman, just to confirm what you're saying, when we had that incident on CQ32, we shut down the job for 1 week.
That have on the progress of the job?
The contractor was ordered to mitigate through overtime and through increased manpower, and he basically recovered the time lost.
Let me add, I cannot disagree with what you've said, Mr. Chairman. My only point is, my view is that people in that business are more focused on what's in their pocket than in getting a job done quickly. And obviously the answer is the safety officer has to have a sense of balance.
Safety officer is a sense of safety responsibility. It's others to worry about the balance. Seriously, that's the point I'm trying to make.
And there's no question.
It can't be more mistakably. I could go back because the reinforcement I was given by David Gunn to shut down jobs, should I had to, and the implied threat of shutting down jobs was far more forceful, and Ms. Kennedy will tell you that as well, because we did it together, internal as well as external jobs. Any further discussion or comment? Okay, next presentation.
Good morning. Traditionally in the safety industry, a stand down is held when there's a major event or an incident, and back in December 2013, as a result of incidents locally and nationally, we were directed to conduct our first corporate-wide safety stand down. Understanding the value and the importance of engaging with our employees on a regular basis in conversation about how they are experiencing safety at the Long Island Railroad, We have committed to doing these events quarterly, taking a step back the entire company and devoting time during the day to talk about safety and some of the challenges and some of the progress that's being made. At the suggestion of Metro North, we've actually now termed these days as safety focus days because they're really now not stand-downs as a result of an event, but shows our ongoing commitment to having a regular dialogue with our employees. Quarterly now, we average about 4,000 employee attendance at each event, and the facilitator package and material is actually developed by corporate safety and then distributed out to each of the departments, and the departments then can tweak the material to better suit their needs. Traditionally, the topics and the standard topics that are in the package revolve around safety performance because we want to make sure that our employees are aware of the types of events and the types of numbers that we're seeing across all the different departments. We also take the opportunity to inform them of any regulatory or policy changes and give them an opportunity to better understand what's being done, why it's being done, and how it impacts them, and give them the opportunity to engage in questions. We also use the opportunity to highlight through red alerts and incident reviews major events that may have occurred and reinforcing the proper techniques, rules, procedures, PPE, whatever might be applicable. We provide the C3RS update to ensure that our employees are aware of the types of events that are being reported and the recommendations that are being made. And we also are sure to include seasonal safety reminders. So as the seasons change, obviously the hazards that our employees may encounter change, and we want to make sure that they're aware, especially the personal protective equipment that's available to them to help them get through that season. And finally, we also take the opportunity to focus on the trends that we're seeing. So if there's a particular uptick in an area, whether it's material handling, slip, trips, falls, whatever the pattern might be, we take the opportunity to talk about what we're seeing and also provide strategies for them to take into account when they're planning their work, actually performing their tasks and making sure that they're ready and able to get done the job that is before them. For us, the focus actually is is actually an acronym, and we kind of touched on some of these items, human factor items before, but it's actually a series of posters that get issued with each safety stand-down. Focus, fatigue, outside influences, communication, uncertainty, and situational awareness are the underlying themes, and as each safety focus day is held, a different area of human factor challenges is addressed. And again, we hold these events quarterly. Our next event actually is tomorrow with a focus on ergonomics. I'm going to be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, good morning. Similar to Long Island, we held our first safety stand down in December 2013. As of the second quarter of this year, we also changed the name to Safety Focus Day, and it's also held quarterly, and we average about 4,000 attendees. So just a few of the topics that we've held so far this year is electronic devices is the first. This continues to be a very important topic for us as well as all railroads, and given new technology such as Fitbits, iWatches, things of that nature, this is something we want to continue to keep in the forefront of our employees' minds. The next item is job safety briefings. These are essential for employees to perform their tasks in a safe manner. And ensuring our employees have detailed and appropriate job briefings is something we always focus on, and this just serves as another reminder for our employees. C3RS, this continues to be something we talk about on a monthly basis, and we want to make sure we continue to promote this for our employees. It's a very important risk reduction program for us. The next item is Healthy for You. This is a new health initiative for us in Metro North, and we just want to make sure all employees are aware of this initiative. And basically, we just talk about various topics on eating and living healthy, both at work and at home. The next item is the Safety Excellence Awards, which is a new safety initiative for us in Metro North. This year, we will be giving Safety Excellence Awards to a department or group, district, and individuals who exhibit excellence in safety. Next is our Safety Challenge Policy. This is a new policy for us which allows employees to challenge any safety rule or procedure which they feel is unsafe. And then there's a process that it goes through to confirm that either it was safe or it wasn't. If it wasn't, then we take the necessary corrective actions. And this is done in a way for our employees to not fear reprisals. So this is something very good for us. And then finally, injury trends, because it varies by department or by group, location, things of that nature, we kind of tailor it to each group, and the safety department works with the various departments or locations to figure out what works best for them, so they can add additional topics as part of the Safety Focus Day, which only focuses on that specific group.
Any comments or questions? We'll continue on.
Good morning. I'm going to discuss the New York City Transit and MTA bus. Safety focus efforts within maintenance away and car equipment in subways are performed through quarterly safety briefings. The safety information is presented in the briefings, follows an outline developed by our operations training department with guidance from system safety, and it's also customized by division, so it tailors it to what's necessary in that area. The format's designed to stimulate discussion. It's not just a lecture, so there are questions and answers so they can talk back and forth to each other, not just lecturing at the employee. The briefings are given by management, and they're held in crew quarters within maintenance away and maintenance shops and car equipment. Approximately 8,500 employees attend those briefings on a quarterly basis. Next slide. Safety focus efforts are done a little differently in service delivery, and that includes our train operators and conductors and the station department, as they are done in smaller groups. Monthly safety critiques are held with approximately 6,600 employees in those two divisions, and the format's also designed to stimulate discussion. It's not just a lecture. Next slide. The buses holds monthly employee focus on safety discussions with their employees in the depots. The safety topics are selected by the depot management with guidance from safety, and the format involves interactive discussions with the employees. Overall, they reach about 15,000 employees within transportation and maintenance. Next slide. The topics for the safety efforts come from a variety of sources which are listed on this slide. We use employee injury trends and efforts taken to mitigate them. We recently targeted overexertion accidents throughout the authority. Close call incidents that we want to bring to their attention. We may also emphasize findings from job task hazard assessments, trends from field observations or audits in the field, new or updated bulletins, safety advisories or policies, trends related to the performance of operating procedures that we see through efficiency testing or field observations. And we also put out Safety Times newsletters, so they also get topics from those areas. So if you have any questions.
Okay, next item, Mr. Mayor.
The final item I may have cryptically titled Rail Infrastructure Improvement Grants. What we want to talk about is recent funding that has been received and how we're going to put it to use to make a variety of different kinds of improvements at grade crossings. Grade crossing safety is of particular importance to the Federal Railroad Administration and the Federal Railroad Administrator herself. And recently, a few months ago, nationwide, $25 million was made available on a competitive grant basis for rail infrastructure improvements and particularly for improvements at grade crossings. This was well-timed for us. As you know, we've had an expert consultant on board for some time now, helping us assess crossings and develop action plans for making improvements at crossings. And one of probably the key benefits of that activity is it's allowed us and our railroads to build closer ties with the local roadway authorities, and because of that, we were well positioned to apply for a variety of grants. So the next slide just shows the press conference where the Congressman Lowy and others announced the award of the grants, and the next slide just explains a little bit about the projects that we applied for, all of which were funded. The total funding coming to New York is in excess of $5 million, and totaling up state and local matches, the cost of the projects is just over $11 million. So there are basically three efforts that will be funded as a result of these grants. The installation of closed-circuit television at 44 crossings in New York, highway traffic signal preemption projects, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, and then site-specific improvements at 3 crossings, and I'll show you a few pictures of those crossings and talk to you a little bit about that. So first, we're talking about equipping crossings with vehicle-activated CCTV. There'll be 34 crossings on Metro North territory and 10 crossings on Long Island Railroad. They'll be equipped with vehicle detection technology and be able to help us. There are a variety of benefits of using these cameras. It'll allow real-time observation of activities at crossings and provide information on crossing functionality, driver behavior, which will help us target safety initiatives, and of course, it'll assist with instant investigations as well at those crossings. So, traffic signal preemption. Traffic signal preemption, just in case you may not be familiar with it, basically it's used when it's used on highway traffic signals, roadway traffic signals, where roadways are close to our grade crossings, and activities driving at the intersections could cause a queue to develop over the tracks. So when a traffic signal is preempted, the train approach activates the traffic signal at the intersection, allowing traffic to clear so that in advance of the activation of the gates and lights. Metro North will be using some grant funds to equip 7 grade crossings on both the Harlem and Port Jervis lines, where the crossings are close to a highway. The traffic signal preemption will be installed there. So that's probably enough on traffic signal preemption. To talk a little bit about some specific sites that we have received some funding for. On the Long Island Railroad, the 2 sites are Atlantic Avenue and Executive Drive. There'll be changes to roadway geometry to improve conditions there, installation of loop-activated cameras with digital video recorders, the installation of traffic signal preemption, and a study to determine if additional traffic signals are needed. So the next slide just shows a little map of Atlantic Avenue. You can see it moving horizontally across the screen, and there's moving to below Atlantic Avenue is Access Road. There's a lot of development that's scheduled that will increase the traffic on Access Road, and if you see this overhead view, you can see that particularly large vehicles making left turns across our crossings can sometimes remain foul of the tracks for an extended period of time. And it's the hope there and the goal that site-specific improvements and improved traffic signals will mitigate that issue and mitigate that problem. It's in Oceanside. Yeah, it's in my notes, and I intended to say it. Executive Drive in Deer Park is this next one. You can see in the top photograph evidence that heavy vehicles, commercial vehicles making a right turn there are scuffing up that concrete barrier that's been placed to protect some railroad infrastructure. And the intent there is that the space available for vehicles making that turn will be improved, as well as another number of other site-specific improvements to increase the flow of traffic and reduce the likelihood of fouling the tracks there. And then on Metro North territory, the crossing that's been funded is Virginia Road and North White Plains, where the rubber road panel will be replaced with concrete. Tubular markers will be installed. The grade will be corrected a little bit there to improve geometry and sight lines, and highway-approved guardrails will be installed to replace concrete barriers. So there are a few pictures of Virginia Avenue. And it's a little tough to see the grade, but if you look at the top right picture, you can see the signs with the chevrons on them to try to guide drivers' eyes around to the right as they traverse the crossing. What's this location? This is Virginia Road.
Yeah, but where is it?
Oh,
North White Plains, yeah.
Just outside the limits of the yard.
Yes.
Yes. So a number of site-specific improvements will be done here. One of the things that I've noticed driving over this crossing is just because of the grade that rises for the crossing and then falls on the other side of it, it's kind of difficult to actually see and recognize that that they're railroad tracks that cross the road. And so it's the hope that these improvements will make the crossing a little bit more conspicuous and improve safety there. So I think the moral of the story that I'm wanting to show you in those site-specific improvements is that often the things that are needed to improve safety at intermediate crossings are really outside the scope of the railroad. They belong to the local roadway authority or state DOT. So it's particularly gratifying that we have built improved relationships with those roadway authorities, and also that we were able to partner with New York State DOT and the roadway authorities to apply for funds that will actually be used to make a lot of roadway improvements.
We owe the committee, David's group and the railroads owe the committee an update on the contract work that we're enlisted with Rick Campbell and Associates in terms of going around and assessing all the grade crossings. This is a merger or amalgamation of a number of different activities, but there was an opportunity to get federal funding to do something. To say that, we have grade crossing exposures is an understatement. To say that, we talk about behavioral issues, and when they're behavioral issues of our own employees, you have some level of control over your employees, but you have limited or no control over people who are the general public. So we're trying to take a look at building upon whatever the MUCTD calls for, but going beyond that. Because certainly we're at a point in time where trains are moving faster, they're moving more frequent, we're under more service, and we've got to do everything possible to avoid what was a very, very painful event for a lot of people, not just us, but the community at Valhalla. Any questions? I think you had a question first, Andrew.
Is there a list somewhere what federal grants or what types of safety improvements federal grants are eligible for?
I don't know that there's one specific list, but there's a whole website of called grants.gov that where all of these funding opportunities are published, and our grants people and the grants folks at the railroads monitor them very closely. And when something is posted there that looks like we might have an interest or an ability to get a project funded, we do jump on it.
Very high level of visibility to this issue created a dynamic that didn't exist before. I think David talked about the fact there's a much higher level of interaction between New York State DOT, local municipalities, and the railroads. To say the FRA is committed, Sarah Feinberg's had, if not one, a number of meetings not only with Joe or myself and her commitment, and in a large part, I think that's why we got $5 million out of $25 million. Neil, and I think you had a question, Mitch.
So with all due respect, one, I appreciate that Congressman Lowy was able to bring this money to us. Two, I appreciate that you were able to get a lion's share, a significant proportion of it. I'm sure it's going to help. However, I would say that deeds, not words, and $25 million, come on. We've got hundreds of grade crossings, and this is $25 million for the country, not for us. When I read the article in the Journal News several weeks ago, I thought I misread the number, and I thought I misread million or billion. $25 million will...
We can use trillion here. We can really use trillion.
And Tom, one of your most brilliant things I tell people all the time, the $1 trillion asset is an extraordinary number to keep in my head, which even makes the $25 million even more frightening. It is not even a drop in a bucket. It is nothing in a bucket to what the need is in this country to keep our equipment in a state of good repair. And I say this through us to our federal friends. I'm sure this administration has worked hard for it, as will the next administration work hard. I hope to see greater things with an infrastructure bank, but I urge us to not accept that being, and I'm sure you will not accept that for being a meaningful amount of money, because $25 million for this country for rail safety is, well, it's not much.
Two things. First of all, I'm pleased to see that executive drive is being done. There's very likely going to be a significant development project just north of Executive Drive shortly, and that is going to, it's a bad crossing to begin with because of the intersection of the train, the industrial park, the golf driving range, and the roadway there. And so whatever improvements we can make there are obviously going to be beneficial in that regard, because there's going to be a lot more traffic in that area than there is today. On the second note, on the question on the closed-circuit cameras issue, and I'm not, I don't know the answer to this question. I think I know the answer, but I'll ask the question anyway. Do we monitor those cameras in real time so that if we saw a car on the tracks, that a communication could go to the train operator coming down the tracks to let them know that there is a car or vehicle on the tracks already because my assumption is that, the car doesn't come when the train gets there, it's already there before the train gets there. And so the question is there a way we can get that information to the operator of the train so they know the car is there before they get there?
There are very few camera installations yet on MTA railroads that do real-time monitoring. This will significantly increase the number, and it'll be up to the two railroads to work out exactly operational procedures for monitoring. I mean, it is the engineer's primary job to be vigilant to what's ahead on the crossings, and they do their jobs. I have no doubt about that.
I'm not right. The problem, of course, is the train is going at some speed, 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, depending upon the context of the track. And the ability of the engineer to see the vehicle is there only happens in some period of distance. It doesn't happen 3 miles ahead. It may happen, I don't know, how long, at what point does the engineer see the vehicle is there? And can we elongate that area by technology to let them know beforehand there is a vehicle there so they can stop or slow down or whatever may be necessary to alleviate the contact?
The answer to the question is yes. The question, in terms of is there technology available, the next question is how realistic is that technology to be applied now? But it's a fair point. If we digress and go over to transit, because we had an issue with trespassers on the right-of-way, and we've got a pilot test out with respect to identifying people that are violating that space. And the designs I have seen is it provides a warning, flashing light, alarm, and additional means for a train operator to become aware that there may be something on the track.
Significantly before they otherwise would see it. Before they would see it visually.
I won't say significant, I won't qualify it, but before
they would see it
additional level of
visually.
information. Cheryl can provide a little bit more, so.
Yeah, it does provide a warning in advance of where the individual is on the track. So
Right.
it's
So you could have a
intrusion
flashing light at the platform, but also up the track.
Yes, it's up the track.
So the train operator would enter the station differently, because not theoretically, operationally, they're supposed to hit the platform at full speed and go into full braking.
Right.
I was the keynote speaker at the New Technology Train Control Conference, because we changed the name of it, and I basically put a challenge to the community at large, not necessarily to tie into the signal circuit, but is there a way we can use technology to provide advance warning of people, vehicles, or what on the tracks? You've seen, Pat has experienced, Long has experienced, a number of cases in the last 2 years of people apparently following a Google Map advisory and turning onto the right-of-way and getting stranded. So that's an area we have to explore, and we have to push the envelope, because we should be using technology to our benefit to try to, as well as education, as well as engineering. The one picture of that one grade crossing is you could not have put that industrial road at a worse location immediately adjacent to the tracks.
Right.
So, and sometimes you can't undo that stuff. Chuck?
But those type of decisions were made way before now, when unfortunately grade crossing safety may not have been their paramount issue, because if grade crossing safety was the paramount issue, that would not have been done the way it is now done. And so we are left with a situation where decisions were made for a lengthy period of time, not taking this issue into account, and now we have to backtrack and take this issue into account, and we're not going to be able to move the road. Moving the road would be the easy way out and the safest way out. Unfortunately, we can't move the road in that context. Let me ask you, is there a way to tie this in any way to positive train control, where that would assist the engineer in being aware or stop the train? I don't know the answer to the question, I just know we're doing it.
Yes, the question is how do you do it, and do you make it part of the safety critical part of the design? But that was the challenge I gave to the community at large when I testified. I was a keynote speaker. I said, we need to use technology to increase awareness and information for the locomotive engineer.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Thank you.
Mr. Merdler?
Two thoughts. Is it possible to use sensor technology that is geared to weight to determine that there is a wait at the grade crossing on the tracks and communicate that to the train operator. They are using that kind of weight sensor technology in a variety of areas in Europe, and I wondered why we aren't doing it here. The second part is, on those barriers that you put down, I saw in Florida that they had, on some of these barriers, wires, sometimes even multicolored wires, so that it accentuated the fact that there was that. It's not a very expensive thing to do that. When it hangs down, it catches attention and accentuates the barrier. You might take a look at that.
We'll certainly take a look at that, and certainly our experimentations with both loop and radar detection will help us better understand the reliability with which we can detect vehicles and make judgments on how we want to use that information in the systems.
There's weight, there's radar, there's inductive loops. There's a number of ways you can detect the presence of a vehicle.
Just a quick comment. Just speaking with Mitch a little bit, we'd have to really be careful once we talk about advance warning of what decisions are made when the locomotive engineer gets this advance warning, because again, it always, to me, gets back to pedestrian behavior. So obviously, if we get advance warning for a vehicle, that would be great, and the train engineer would certainly know to stop the train. But behaviors would really show that we would see a lot of bad behavior. And if the train is constantly going to react to sensors or lights on that behavior, it'll drastically affect operations.
Point well taken. That concludes the last item on the agenda. I have no further questions. I believe we have another Safety Committee meeting in December. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor? Aye. We'll reconvene for the board meeting at 10 a.m.